Thompson. Okay, just got the message that we're recorded. So a little bit about me. I am a co-founder of P3 Mental Health Advisors. We do kind of a variety of things, including sort of helping organizations to go through applications. We do a lot of trainings with staff around topics related to mental health. And then we also do a little bit of on-call sort of emergency, crisis management stuff as well. So that's a little bit about P3. My background, I have been in higher education for 26 years. I got my master's in counseling gazillions of years ago. I've worked in lots of different roles in higher ed. And then I spent 7.5 years living and working in Europe for study abroad program. And I was also an assistant dean of students at a small school in Switzerland. And then what else have I done? I decided to go back to graduate school because I love learning. So I got my doctorate at Syracuse. I finished in 2015. And I have been working, I'm in about, I think my 9th year doing college student mental health. So working in college counseling. I've spent the last 6 years working at Regis University in Denver, Colorado. I'm Boulder based now, and I'm very happy to be here. And I teach graduate courses in counseling for several universities. And then I think last but not least, I've worked for semester at sea on 3 voyages and sailed in 2019 as a mental health counselor, which was amazing. And I feel fortunate to have done that before the pandemic hit. So that's a long bio about me. And I love working with the emerging adult population. That's kind of my thing. So here I am. I hope no one's too disappointed that the other people aren't here, but hopefully we can have a good discussion.
We're thrilled to have you, Laura. And a lot of you might know Laura. She has presented at a lot of our conferences in the past with Gary Robinson, who also co-founded P3 Mental Health. So we're thrilled to have you. So originally when we had Janis Whitlock, who's from Cornell and the Jed Foundation, and then Laura, and most of you know who Sarah Persha is, we were discussing, the 4 of us were discussing ways that we could kind of tackle this mental health issue and what's been happening with the pandemic. And as we emerge out of the pandemic and look at emerging adults really, and how they're emerging out of the pandemic. And as we all know, when we talk about emerging adults, we're talking about our students. And in some cases, we also might be talking about our staff as well. So sometimes our staff might verge on that, be on the cusp of not quite an adult, full-fledged adult yet. So there's not that much research out there. That was kind of the general consensus. The research, nobody's come to, specific data or findings around what is going to happen. Oh, here comes Janis, hooray. But we feel like between now that we have Janis and Laura, we'll be able to get some good ideas and insights into working with students as the world kind of finds this new normal. Janis, are you able to be with us?
I am. Thank you. I'm so sorry.
No, wonderful. I'm thrilled to have you here. And just in time, Laura was just finishing up introducing herself and getting ready to ride this wave on her own. But now we have Janis.
Are you doing introductions?
Yeah, so we'll have you introduce yourself in just a minute. And then I'll jump back in with some of the questions that we'll tackle, and then we'll go through those questions. Again, even now that we have Janis, everyone who's in the audience, please feel free to jump in as much as possible. And Laura and Janis, I'm already getting requests for your contact info, if you'd be willing to put it in the chat at some point. There have already been 2 requests for your contact info via direct message to me. So Janis, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Janis Whitlock. I'm here today representing the Jed Foundation. I'm the Senior Director for Knowledge and Advising. But I moved to Jed fairly recently. I'm also still a research scientist at Cornell. I also teach there, and I do a lot of different research and writing and speaking related to adolescent and young adult mental health and well-being, particularly in the areas of self-injury and suicide prevention, but also connectedness, resilience, and and thriving. So I've worked as before I was an academic. I've been an academic for 24 years. It's kind of weird to leave academia. But before then, I spent a decade in the field working directly with young people and families and schools. I was a sex educator for a long time. So I feel like I kind of know this landscape, and I'm watching things this year really closely because it's a really unique time for sure. Some unique stressors.
Great, thanks, Janice. So the main question I think we want to tackle is what have you two, Laura and Janice, noticed in terms of mental health trends that have been popping up this year? What's striking from your vantage point? Laura, why don't you start us off and let Janice settle in? Okay.
And I don't want to take up too much, of the space, but I think a big thing is just I kind of jotted down a few thoughts. Anxiety is the number one reason that college students nationwide tend to come to college counseling for support. And I've just noticed a significant increase in, sort of the reported anxiety symptoms of a lot of the students with whom I work. Loneliness, isolation, disconnection, or just feeling really disconnected. So, that obviously feeds both depression and anxiety. I think, I've read about this, and and so some of this is anecdotal, but also suicidal thinking. That's more Janice's domain, so I'm gonna, defer to her on that. But there are reports in the research that say, suicidal thinking has increased during the past years, or the past year. I think sort of boredom and this lack of connection, people are turning to some unhealthy coping skills. There's a lot of screen time that can include pornography use. And, the brain's developing until about the age of 25. And so one of the concerns is the students or young people who aren't being supervised with their screen time, aren't necessarily disciplined with it. And so lots of stuff. There's a movie some of you may have seen called The Social Dilemma that really speaks to some of the concerns about engaging with so much time online and apps and all of that. And so, those are some things. And then I think last but not least, one thing that comes to mind too is substance abuse. I've known of several people to relapse during this time. I've known people who are doing pretty well, and it's been really, really hard for a lot of people. So, yeah.
Well, I don't have a lot to add because that's a pretty comprehensive list. I will say that I spent the last 2 days, can't believe somebody did this. They did a Zoom conference that started at 8:30 and ended at 6 for the last 2 days. And it was packed. There was a half an hour, and then there were like 3 5-minute breaks. It was really insane. But I had to pop in and out, but I stayed because because it riveted me. The whole conference was on social media and mental health and this current state of the research. So good timing, right? But, and I'm sorry, because I feel like I could have slides and stuff. I took a lot of pictures of the screen as we were going through, because there was a lot of like really current data that hasn't been published yet from all over the world, but mostly US, Canada, and UK scholars, although some Australian scholars from there too. But in any case, the picture is not good, as you expect. The rates of anxiety and depression, I think, tripled in the last year with the current studies that haven't been published yet among adolescent young adults. Interestingly, suicide rates, I think probably some of you know, have gone down over the last couple of years. We don't know what this year will yield exactly, but there is the expectation that rates of suicide will probably climb as we go through the next, whatever comes next, just because of the sort of post-COVID depression, the post-COVID fatigue and all of the reckoning that happens. And yet I say that, and I think it's so strange because I don't feel like we're out of any woods yet, really. And COVID was not the only player, as you know, on the landscape last year. There were just so many differential impacts and so many different differential issues. And gosh, it's possible that 21 will be even weirder than 20 in some ways. So, and harder depending on how everything goes in the next 6 months. It's been a chock-full few months since 2021. So I do feel like everybody's hitting a wall. That's what you see. I'm seeing it not just in young people, and I'm sure everybody here is seeing that too. There's just substance use and abuse is going up with adults too. There's a lot of alcoholism. One of the things that came out of the conference that was pretty shocking was the amount of body dysmorphia and body discomfort, which especially young women are exhibiting. I think in a more recent study somebody did, it was 56% of a random sample of young women said that they're really uncomfortable in their bodies, and it's gotten worse. And not all of them are exhibiting signs of eating disorders, but I would expect that to be climbing if it hasn't already significantly changed. I'm sure that it has. So it's a sobering picture out there. I spent the morning working on guidance for JED around what guidance we're going to give schools, and basically the upshot is, don't try to dive back in. Don't try to just get going. There is no normal to get back to. None of us don't even know if we want normal to get back to. And people aren't going to be ready. Young people really need time to digest and make sense of where they are at and what this new landscape is, and how to reconnect with people in healthy ways, and how to get back in touch with their body, and how not to feel, I don't mean their body in terms of, I mean, they're being in their body and out in the world. And they're going to need support, and they need to not feel like they have to do it really fast. And, just to get back to school and get back to learning. I think I'm going to end this piece with, I think we need to focus on other kinds of learning right now. It's like the universe is presenting us opportunities to learn in entirely different ways and about entirely different things. And we should probably go with it rather than fight it. So I'm really a bit concerned and curious to find out, to see, what the school, how when things start to move back, how that's going to feel and look and be. And I really hope that everybody here who's positioned to support sort of youth serving professionals in every way, whether it's through schools or clinical practice or other youth serving systems, can really encourage them to just make a lot of space for the kinds of issues that are, the mental health issues that are going to be coming back in.
Thanks, Janis.
Yeah.
So thinking about not diving right back in and starting back where we were maybe in early 2020, and also thinking about students who have chosen a different path than to go straight to college. So there probably are going to continue to be more students choosing gap years, as we saw last year. And we will see a bit of a shift in the educational landscape when it comes to higher ed. So what do you two feel about all of us who are working with youth and young people in general, whether it be the staff or the students? What should we be keeping an eye out for, and how should we be framing our interactions with them, framing curriculum, particularly in these experiential education programs, when they're abroad, maybe having first independent experiences in a new culture, or independent experiences away from their home? What are some of the things that we should be looking at in terms of framing how we work with those students?
I think that's a really great question. And I think some of this is just hunches. It's not like this is going to work, but I do think about, I just am thinking about a lot about sort of the impact that so much social isolation and screen time has had on people. And so many people, I teach, graduate courses in substance abuse counseling, and most of my students are attached to their phones, and they spend hours and hours and hours a day on phones. So I think that's one thing, is like people who've been tethered to a screen, whether it's their computer or the phone, now, are out in programs where, leaders and organizers want the students to engage. And I think, a lot of them are going to, I don't want to say, the word's not addicted, but I want to say highly attached to their devices. So it's like, how do you get people to be more present, right? And participate? I think that's one thing. And I had another thought and it just escaped me. Janis, do you want to add? And I'll see if I can come back to my thought.
Yeah, sure. I just want to know if I forgot. You said reference porn before. One of the presenters at the talk in the last few days presented on porn, and yeah, it's not good. And yeah, it's not good. And there was an enormous spike in news, And as you know, there's been a concomitant decrease in people actually having sex. So that's an entirely different subject, but it links to this and the thoughts I had about this, because I was thinking, like my son went back to Oberlin just a couple weeks ago. This is his second semester, the way they did it. And so it's been really interesting to watch his adjustment, because he literally started college as he had 1 year of his freshman year after a gap year, 1 year of his freshman year, and then COVID hit, and he's been online since. So this is only technically the second semester on campus. And so one of the things that I'm really noticing about the things he's talking about, first of all, I really noticed how excited he is. I got to tell you, and it's not about college. It's just about being with people. And one of the biggest casualties for young adults of this age has been a suspension of purpose. I don't want to say a loss of purpose. I think it was just like a press pause on their purpose and on their sense of momentum. And, we're all really developmentally driven to go out in the world and make stuff and connect with people at that age, especially. It wasn't that hard. This year wasn't that hard for me to be in my home doing the stuff I do, but it was really hard for young people who just wanted to connect. So there's this great, I would expect that there'd be some enthusiasm just to get back together, to have things to do. Totally agree with Laura said about the devices. But I think if we could offer them, think in advance about how to get people engaged with each other, engaged outside, ideally, engaged in their bodies, moving in ways that are interesting and entertaining, they may not mind putting their phones down. A lot of the young people I've talked to do feel compelled to have their phones or their devices, but they don't like it. They don't like what kind of hold it has on them. And I think that if we give them ways and, engaging opportunities to get away, I don't think it'll be that hard. They may just need a little bit of let's start out with a half hour and then I need to an hour. I don't know what it'll be, but we need some scaffolding here. I'm not totally sure about that. The other thing is touch and human connection. I think that was something I definitely noticed. And my son didn't come out and say it right away, straight up like that, but it came up in another talk, kind of like this. And another presenter was talking about, so he has noticed kids really craving touch. Like haven't had a lot of touch, especially if they weren't living with their families they were out dating and they're not out goofing around with their friends. So that's just another thing it's not like you can schedule in touch, but things that allow them to interact, goof around, play, roll, jump, just connect with each other and pile up like puppies. I think those are things that we need. We need to just feel like we can play again, I think, especially young people. And I would actually try to avoid too much talking about mental health stuff. I mean, we want to build it in. I want to build the remedies in, not just cogitate and talk about the stuff they've already experienced. I think that just is going to feel like they're revisiting hard moments when what they really need is to live, to have places to just let down and then process when needed, because it's definitely going to come up if it hasn't already. Okay, Laura, I'm passing that to you.
I was going to add just sort of like what I've seen over the course of the last year is not, pre-pandemic was just sort of this inability for a lot of students or young people to communicate well and effectively. They do a lot of texting. I've had students before will tell me that, oh yeah, I was in my residence hall room and my roommate is next to me texting me things rather than speaking to me directly about them. And I worry about, sometimes I'm like, what, but I worry about sort of the impact, the re-engaging. People are excited to engage, but I think some people have maybe their social skills could potentially have been hindered during this time. And that could be a thing. I think this is just a prediction. I don't know, it's a hunch that I wonder about. I've been saying for the last months, I'm like, when things open up again, people are going to be partying like it's 1999, and I live in Boulder. I walked down Pearl Street recently and I was like, where did all these people come from? And I mean, restaurants and bars were just overflowing. And a few months ago in Boulder, there was this huge CU party. It made national news, like a raging, took up a neighborhood and all kinds of car damage and whatever, and was bad PR for CU and for Boulder. But I worry sometimes that because people are so excited to be out there again, that potentially their substance use could continue to they could, engage in more binge drinking, more just kind of getting wild, and, the negative consequences that come with that. And I know somebody had asked the question, Abby, have I seen any increase in anxiety from people who are kind of engaging in the real world? I haven't seen that yet. And I think it's maybe because things are so newly opening up. But one thing that has come up in some of my sessions in the past months is challenges that students have with safety. So like they may be really cautious and mask wearing, but their housemates are not following same protocol, and their housemates are out and about, hooking up with people and not taking precautions on lots of levels. And then, potentially exposing people, to just, so there's not wearing masks and stuff. So I think, there's been a lot of, I think unfortunately a public health issue has become, in my opinion, politicized, and that has created a lot of issues. So I think that could also be something, people's comfort level with opening back up and, emerging. And some people are not ready to engage, and other people are, masks off, ready to go. What's the problem?
I'm glad you said that, Laura, because that is so true, right? Like, it's like some young people have actually enjoyed not having so much going on. A lot of adults have enjoyed not having so much going on. But there are people who struggle with some degree of social anxiety to begin with, have probably fared better, but are going to have a harder time at this point, going back out and re-engaging and remembering how to navigate the awkwardness that they feel inside when things come up, especially if the expectation among their peers is to go hog wild. That is going to be tricky. So I think you're right. We shouldn't assume that everybody, all young people, are going to be in the same place with regards to their comfort as well as what they want, how they want to engage with the world.
I feel like even just in general, not just youth, but all of us are kind of having those same conversations maybe we had last spring, where, okay, I'm comfortable with this, I'm not comfortable with that, you're comfortable with this, you're not comfortable with that, with our neighbors, with friends, and different people are opening in different ways. And I think, yes, the youth might be ready to party, but there are certainly those folks who might have enjoyed this excuse not to be super social. But watching out for them as those awkward conversations come up, and not shaming people for still wearing their mask, or, having certain anxiety around COVID transmission or something like that, certain activities.
And I feel like one of the things about this sort of age range is that a lot of them are still very heavily influenced by their parental attitudes, right? So parents are influencing behaviors essentially, and it can get tricky. I'm going to a retreat in like a week or two, and it's we were having a meeting the other night, and this one woman was like, I'm not comfortable being hugged, which I thought was like, I was like, what? Like, but I think it's like this intensive workshop, and she announced to the group, like, you can't hug me. And it's, it's like, I feel like we need to wear masks, like, you're allowed to touch me, you're not allowed to touch me, like, please stay at a distance. No, it's okay if you come close. I think there's going to be a lot of confusion, in terms of what, it's almost like touch consent, not in a sexual way, but like, what are you okay with? And it's, I see people now, and it's like, are you okay hugging? Are you not okay hugging? We've lost handshakes like that. Those, I haven't, had a handshake in over a year. So it's just really, I think it's going to be confusing in a weird way,
Yeah, great point. So, Abby, thank you for your question in the chat. We have a couple other questions on a little bit more of a positive note, hopefully. But does anyone feel free to put another question in the chat if you do, or raise a hand, but I'll just jump in for Janis and Laura. What do you think are some of the silver linings that have happened? We've talked a little bit about maybe those who had social anxiety, and this might have been a positive time for them. I know I've seen, like, our babysitter has gone viral with her embroidery art, You know, she's taken up some really great creative time, and she has 1 million followers on Instagram now, and has so many orders that she has a second full-time job. So I know some people who have taken up art and really dove into a craft or some kind of vocational skill or something like that. But what are some of the silver linings that we're seeing, particularly among the emerging adults population?
Do you want to start?
Okay.
Or I'll go if you want.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. And these are, you know, it's a tough one, but I think, you know, to your point, like there are some people who've really used this time to develop new skills or, you know, become better at their art or their, you know, craft. And so I think it has given people some time. I know in the last year and a half, I've gotten more comfortable being with myself, and I'm an extrovert, you know? And so it's like, I've gotten a lot better, you know, at just kind of being alone. And so I think for, you know, for young people, I think for a lot of people, it's given them time, right? So more time with family, and in some cases is a positive thing. In some cases, it's a really painful thing. But, you know, for some people, that extra time with parents and family and connection, you know, gives them maybe a little more opportunity to mature and grow before they launch. And I think it's given people more time to kind of dream about what they want to do, you know, after this, you know, things get better. And then I think, you know, last but not least, I think people are just so ready to live, you know, like to step into life. I mean, a lot of people are, and I think people are dreaming of travel and just, you know, opportunities. And I think for the study abroad and the gap year world, this could be a really positive thing because, you know, like Dianna said, I think I just read an article that said, you know, as many as 40% of young people, you know, graduates are considering a gap year next year. And so, you know, a lot more schools are seeing deferred enrollment, and that can create issues with admission. You know, there's not as many spots necessarily, but I think for the world that we're, you know, orbiting, it could be a really positive thing.
That's so true. And I just see, I've seen the chat. I think we need to celebrate. Terry says, I think we need to celebrate students' resilience, strength, in navigating all of this. The reality is that a lot of them were out there as essential workers through the rest of it. That's so true. Yeah, you know, I have a journaling study going, and I occasionally look at it. And I was looking at it recently, and it's really cool. It started in March, and people are journaling every day from around the world. So I recently pulled the data just to look for what young people were saying, and we have questions in there about silver linings, like what are the silver linings of this time? And I'm really struck by how many people talk about how gratitude, like there's gratefulness for a variety of different things, but there is a lot of gratitude for something. So that was interesting. Even young people, there was missingness, but they're thankful for more time with their family. They're thankful for less stuff to do. There fewer obligations. I mean, there was a lot of things that came up. Time with family has been interesting because I do feel like that is one thing that comes up there, or not just family, but relationships. It seems like relationships go one way or another this year. It was either they got stronger or they didn't, but they didn't stay where they were. They're not like, I don't know a single relationship that's kind of unchanged since 2020, especially in families, people who are living with other people. The other thing is, I love what you said about being more comfortable in your own skin, because that's the theme that keeps coming up too when I'm doing talks when I'm with young people, especially I've done a few interviews with influencers as part of my job. Interesting. I get to talk with celebrities, but one of the things that they have routinely talked about is how, you know, this is a group of people who are typically out. So, because these are performers more than they're just like screen celebrities. And they were grounded. A lot of them were grounded. And some of them talked about how hard it has been to just be with themselves when they're used to a lot of stimulation, and how good it has been to learn how to go through that passage. Like there's this middle part that they really sucked, but now they're on this other part, and they are grateful for that opportunity to kind of get to know themselves a little bit better. And interestingly, some of the young people that I know that have struggled with suicide or deep depression have said that they fared better than a lot of their friends who haven't, because they already know what it feels like to feel really isolated and alone, and that pulled on skills they feel like they cultivated as a result of the dark nights of the soul that they went through. So it hasn't all been bad. I do also think it's giving people, in addition to the new directions to go and new dreams to dream and time to really excite, there is a potential for a much deeper wisdom that just comes out that we can collectively harvest, not just individually harvest. I don't know how we best do that, but in a purposeful way. But there is, we're deeper. I think we're going to be marked in a way, in some of the same ways that the Great Generation, the Great Depression folks were marked. There's just this, some really hard things can actually really, really happen. It's not an idea, and you've lived through it. And I suspect we'll be harvesting some of those grapes sometime down the line. Some of it depends on what happens now and the next couple of years.
So one of the things I'm hearing too, and I'm just bringing it back to that earlier question about how to create maybe positive circumstances for students, especially when they're on programs or during their gap year. And I'm thinking about the group cohort experience and maybe trying to weave in some very intentional independent time for students where they might be, I often hear from students when they come home from a group semester that they feel like they've lost their limbs because they've had all these people around them kind of cushioning their experience and going through this new journey together. And it might be really important to actually carve out some independent time. So I know a lot of programs do employ journaling and things like that, but it might be important to do even beyond that, like solo days and things, just so students can continue to ground themselves and have that independent experience.
You also just said something that's important. With independence coupled with reflection time, you don't want to force anybody to reflect. But if you build it in and you say, and you give everybody journals or give them something, I don't know, I mean, you don't do it, that way. Sometimes I record my journals, but encourage them to do that. I think it'd be really helpful, because I suspect what we're going to be doing collectively over the next probably 6 months to a year is trying to still make sense of everything that we've come through, and mostly where we are now and what we want. There's just a lot of questions. Even I'm sure you've all, I know I've grappled with it. I know people I know have grappled with it. I don't want to go back to normal. I really don't want to go back to that, but I don't know exactly what's possible, and I don't know exactly where we're going to land, but I want space to be able to think about it. You guys can build that in to some degree, not in an intense way, but be mindful about offering them space to do some reflection and integration, as well as maybe as a group. It'd be kind of interesting to build in some opportunities for the group reflection about, especially where they feel like they might want to take it. What did they learn that they want to bring forward?
Great.
That's such a great point. And it really is, I can't remember where I was, where this was a topic of conversation, but the notion of the reflective piece and giving people prompts potentially to reflect on, because a lot of times students will say, I don't know how to journal. I don't know what to write. And so that's where, prompts can be really helpful, but it's also a way to help people integrate their learning. Right. And I think that's so important. And I think group experiences can be really challenging, even as an extrovert, that it can be too much. Like, I need alone time, I crave it. And so I think, people can get really frustrated, obviously, in group experiences when they don't know when are they going to have some downtime, and when can they have alone time and time to kind of decompress. So I think that's critical. And I really appreciated also Terry's comment, a lot of, about resilience. Like, I do think this time has taught a lot of people resilience and resourcefulness, because we've had to find ways to engage. And, and some of this is a positive thing. I mean, I've seen more of my friends internationally, seen their faces through Zoom than I've seen, even though we're all Zoom, we do have Zoom fatigue. It's like, it's really fun. Like, oh, I never even thought about that possibility before, or it's creating new opportunities, for work. Like, I don't know that I'm going to go back to, my 8:30 to 5 job in an office. Like, I just don't. It's opening new doors. And that's for me, of course, but it's just, So I think we have to think of those things as well.
think it'd be good to like, I don't know how you guys usually start your programs, but I'm sure there's at some point there's group, right? Where people are communicating together, and rather than go, I mean, I'm sure nobody thought about doing this, but I'm just thinking like, gosh, rather than go back into the old template, it'd be really good to think about a new, a COVID response, a past this year template. How do you start it out in a way that honors and acknowledges everything we've been through and doesn't have implicitly, even if it's not spoken, written in, okay, we've got that behind us and now we're going to kind of go back to kind of doing it the way we did it before. But if there's some way to have the space to have those conversations about the balance of together time and alone time, and how do you have those conversations, and are there, you know, maybe there's like, I'm thinking if the students could have something that they could put outside their door that basically means I'm saturated, you know, wrong image maybe, but the idea of that there's some way they can signal I'm saturated, because I'm sure that'll happen. I think there'll be a lot of rushing out potentially, but then there's going to be, we're all going to get overstimulated. I'm already, I go off to a dinner with a bunch of people in the restaurant. I'm like, okay, that's good. I'm going home now. Just want to disappear into the quiet of my room. So I think they're probably going to have some of that too, and they may not know that they need that. So if there's space you can create to have conversations, agreements, ways to signal different cadences than there was before, that might be really helpful, and it would honor the profundity of the experience we've all had and are still having in a lot of ways.
How about after the program? You know, I know a lot of programs, you know, once the student boards the plane or is off, they keep in touch via email, and maybe the staff member who was the direct staff member, the leader, might keep in touch or something like that. And cohorts may keep in touch on their own. Also thinking about our independent gap year students, how, for counselors out there, how can we support them, you know, kind of after they've had this next experience? So they've come out, and we've had students already who are coming out of experiences right now and, you know, maybe reemerging into this, this new normal that we're entering right now. So how about after the fact? Any suggestions there, Laura or Janis, about supporting alums?
I love the idea of having, like, really thinking about reentry and preparing people for some of the realities. Because, you know, I think most of us can speak to experiences where you just had, like, I had a venture around the world on a ship. I mean, it's a pretty unique experience. Some people don't want to hear about it. Some people are jealous. Some people are like, I remember years ago after my first voyage, I said to a family friend, we were talking about the program and I had photos with me. I said, do you want to see my photos? And he's like, no, that's all right. And it's like mind-boggling to me, like, how would you not want to look at photos of the world, you know? but some people aren't interested. And I think that can be really hard for young people who come back home. And, you know, there's this notion of, somebody said to me years ago, I think we have to step outside of our culture in order to understand it. So there's a lot of learning that comes when we're away from our, you know, whether it's a different country or whether it's just my day-to-day culture and life. And so stepping outside of that gives us lots of time to reflect. And sometimes we go back home and a lot of students, young people, and just people in general, I think, have a hard time kind of reintegrating. So I think, you know, one of the things, even to set up, now that we know how to do this Zoom thing, even just having maybe some structured, you know, check-ins once a month, you know, for the group, and anybody who wants to join the call can. And, you know, some people are not going to be interested, but even just to know that that's available and there for ongoing connection with the people with whom you share this really intense experience could be a really, I think, a helpful support.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add after that, especially since I didn't do an organized program like that. But I do wonder if it would be useful to talk to the people coming out now, like the young people that are ending now, about what they would like and what they would recommend having on hand for people, because it is an interesting landscape to come out of. And I'll bet they would have sort of on the ground insights that would be really, really useful. I mean, right now I'm really focused on getting them in, but you're right. Going back out is also a factor. But I think a lot of the same issues we've been talking about applies. And then some of probably the standard issues that you have to deal with, like some of the one you just brought up, Laura, about, you know, how do you interact with other people who may or may not be all that interested in hearing all the details of something you just excited or juiced by, or just experienced and are so juiced by. So
And I think a kind of a side, benefit of doing something like this is the more people feel connected to a program, the more they are going to tell other people about it. And, I know this presentation isn't about marketing your programs, but I've really appreciated when I've been a part of something in the past and there's efforts to keep me connected. And it's not just, will you donate, but it's like opportunities. And, I know when I see people from my international experiences, it's like this bond that we have. Like I can see people I sailed with 20 years ago on semester at sea, and I had a Zoom call with my staff, around Christmas time. And it's like 20 years have passed and yet we still have this bond, and it's pretty cool. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. Any questions from any audience folks? Quiet group. I'm shocked.
I have a question for you. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
Elizabeth, you go for it.
I was going to ask, in the context of mental health, what have you seen Gen Z struggle with that millennials did not struggle with?
That's a great question. And there's a writer, Jean Tweng from San Diego State University, who writes a lot about this generation. I'm trying to think of some of the things.
I can take a stab while you're thinking if you want. I mean, I think there's two big major contrasts. And one is that I think millennials struggled a lot more with depression. I mean, they were the Prozac generation. Gen Zs are much more anxious. Depression levels are lower in Gen Zs. So there's that. That's a pretty interesting piece. And then, I don't know, Jean Tweng says, and I don't know, it's hard to characterize an entire generation this way, but she would have probably identified the millennials as more me focused and the Gen Zs is more we focused. So, and I don't know about the me focus so much, although as a Gen Xer, watching the millennials come up behind, it makes sense. There was a fixation on yourself, and that was for lots of good reasons. But the Gen Zers are much more, I mean, they grew up, think about it, they were born right before 9/11, right after Columbine. Like, I think, some of them were born right before Columbine. So it was Columbine, 9/11, and then everything that's happened since then. So their generation has been marked by political and big event upheaval. So they've been much more schooled in the importance of connection, of all of us thinking, like we're all on this boat together. You can't split off without imperiling everybody, including your own self. So that's something I definitely notice about Gen Zs that I think is really good, but it also makes them very stressed out because the world is in a really hard place. Like there's nothing they can do as a generation or us collectively. It also makes some of them really angry at us older folks. And I totally get that. On the other hand, I do tell my kids, you got to understand, we have all tried. We were all like evolving together here. So we played our part. And I know it doesn't seem like we did enough, but believe me, given what I inherited in 1966 when I was born, we've come some way. I don't know we'll make it full way, but we have moved. So those are some of the differences I notice in them.
And she talks a lot about the phone as well. Like just these young people grew up with their phone, and we didn't, or most of us didn't. I shouldn't say we did. Some of you did, but and just the impact that's had, and just on a lot of these things, and yeah.
And that's been good and bad, right? Like because there definitely has an impact on mental health. There's no doubt about that. Although it's interesting, it is not quite what you think it is. It's like it isn't a clear, like the more you spend on your phone, the worse your mental health is. I saw that over and over and over again this weekend, and they were summarizing all of the state of the research. That was the state of the field. In fact, Jean Twenge was supposed to be there. She wasn't able to be there at the last minute, but there were a lot of top scholars in this conference. And so it's interesting. That's not the impact. It's where people go and what they do and what they're not doing when they're doing that. Those are the things that really seem to matter for phones. But it's definitely impacted their mental health in one way that I think is probably more cumulative than we can get in the kinds of studies we do. So that I'll definitely give. And Jane has been great about really showing that. But it also has made them really conscious about how interconnected we all are. Mm-hmm. It's made them very much more political. It's made them much more conscious of empathetic in some ways. I think, you can be in the middle of a rural area in the South, and you can be somewhere in the North or the West in an urban area, and you can meet each other. You can there's an exchange that can happen that just couldn't happen in the same way, but that I think does make them think more in the global village kind of way. They're definitely more savvy, in terms of using that. And humans don't multitask, but they are really good at being able to find information really quickly. If I need something that's going to take some searching, I just ask my daughter, can you go find this thing for me? And she can spend 30 minutes and come up with all sorts of options for me, because she just likes it, and she knows where to go and what to do. So there's a lot of things that they're just different. I think assuming the human race survives this passage, I think that generation will actually be good to start us off in sort of this next wave of who we are. Honestly, I have hope, because I think they're well-intentioned, but right now they're kind of anxious, and anything we can do to help them calm and ground and feel okay would be really good for them.
And I think coping skills, to speak about anxiety and kind of what do you do with it, it's encouraging them to journal, encouraging them to, there's so many meditation apps now online, that we can download that are free. Encourage them to, listen to music, get outside, walk, there's just a lot of simple ways that people can work to manage anxiety. And I always tell people that I believe wholeheartedly that it's lots of little behaviors combined equal feeling better. It's not necessarily just take this pill and that's going to be the answer. Often that is not the answer, right? Medication certainly does help some people, but medication alone isn't the answer, generally speaking. So, yeah.
And there's a comment in the chat, and then I got a question. I'll just answer the question first, because I think it puts this, and let's go to the comments. That'll be a different conversation. But the question is there a loss of interpersonal person-to-person skills, all Zoom or phone texting? And I think probably to some degree, yes. I mean, we're certainly seeing signs of some of that, but I wonder, Laura, if you can speak to that, because you probably see it in practice. There's a loss of interpersonal to person-to-person skills as a result of devices.
I think so. That's just based on what I've seen with a lot of young people. It just, have a hard time having conversations. Like I said earlier, like people know how to text, and text can be, I think we've all had experiences where we've texted someone or they've texted us and we're not certain of the tone. And so, a lot of my work sometimes is really processing with people, like, how do you communicate to someone that hurt your feelings? Or, how do you let your housemate know or your partner know that you're not okay with behavior? And it's just, that's a hard thing for, I think, humans in general sometimes, but.
I think the comment by Jason speaks to what you were bringing up earlier, Laura, and Dianna, about reintegration. So I want to speak to that.
Mm-hmm. How do we help them be good question askers and understanding that everyone at home has been on a stretched experience as well? I wish there, let me see, what language strategies can we offer students that support them? That, I think that's a hard one, but I think just having conversations and preparing them, like, for the notion that there might be people at home, that like I said, who don't understand your experience, and saying how, having discussion, how can we explain, how could you explain to somebody what you've been doing, and how can you work to not take it personally if someone doesn't show interest, right? Or curiosity about your experience. I really like the idea. I need time to kind of process this one and come up with thoughts, but, journaling prompts, and just putting it on their radar, right? I think that's the most important thing, that this is, there's a transition, just like a lot of students have a hard time when they first arrive somewhere, there's going to be a transition going home. And I think a lot of people get so excited to go home and they don't realize that going back home is going to be hard or could be hard. So I don't know if that really answered your question, Jason.
Well, and I think what Jason's also saying is that being at home this year has kind of been like being in another place. So that maybe has been our stretch zone. And that just simply stepping into the next phase might also be difficult, like we were talking about. So there's all these transitions we need to look out for over the next stretch.
Answering Abby's question. I wonder too, if Dianna, I don't know if you heard earlier, but I wonder if it would be good to ask Jason's question to some of the students coming back now, about what their experience is, because we might be able to get some ideas out of what they're struggling with or what they've noticed, or in a lot of ways, their stretch experience is being paralleled, as you said, with the stretch experience by everybody home. So in some ways they'll be on the same page in terms of it's just been weird. Everything's been weird. Maybe they could just put all their weird dice on the table and talk about it. But it would be really interesting to hear the experience, or to know more about the experience of kids coming back in now. It'd be a very interesting time to have been away.
Yeah, I was thinking focus groups might be really important as we emerge out of the spring semester this year, before jumping into planning too much curriculum around the fall semester. It might be really helpful. And there might be surprise findings, right? Like we might learn things. We might be assuming students are having certain experiences, and there might be, they might not be, because gap year students are kind of a standout group of students. Oftentimes, especially these ones who maybe chose to be on a gap year experience during the pandemic over the last semester. Great. Well, I want to be mindful that we're at the top of the hour. Are there any last questions from others? It doesn't look like it. So Janis and Laura, if you're comfortable with it, I do encourage you to put in your contact info into the chat if you're open to that. Absolutely. And for those of you who are still on the call, I know a few people had to jump, which usually happens at the hour. This is recorded, so we will send out the recording. And hopefully Janis and Laura will both be able to join us at the conference in November, or for other events in the future. I know we all need mental health support and are interested in the mental health perspective. It's such an important topic. So thank you, Janis and Laura, for joining today and jumping into this conversation. It's always a pleasure. I've really enjoyed my time talking with the two of you over the last couple months, I guess, that we've been talking.
Well, thank you for organizing, and thanks for all of you for attending. It is important stuff for sure.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's been great.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.